Mark, I wanted to thank you for your words tonight, reminding us that we don't stand here in isolation. We forget sometimes. We forget that we, as you said, stand on people's shoulders. Every single person in this room, I'm pretty sure, came to Christ because somebody told you. We're made for relationship. Ben, thanks for not only giving prizes, though I didn't win one. It's okay. By the way, Jason, the book, it's a great book. I'll talk a little bit more about it tomorrow. It's a bargain. Okay. Thanks for not only doing that, but having us pray and think about people that we can mentor. Because really tonight is about if we learn this afternoon that we are blessed to be in the middle of the glory of God and looking forward and working towards sharing His glory in eternity, then tonight is about passing that glory on. But we're going to start with ourselves. So tonight we talk about 3 people every pastor needs. I need to start with an apology. I'm sorry that our wives are not in the list. It's a given. That wasn't a very good save, was it? Okay. I want us to think about how our lives have been impacted and now how ultimately we pass that on to others. Think about the passage that as Paul describes, 2 Timothy chapter 2:2, one of my favorite passages when I think of ministry. The things that we've heard among faithful people, what are we to do? Pass those on to others who will be faithful to teach others also. We have a ceremony that we use in School of Ministry. We probably started it a decade or so ago. And at our big spring banquet every year, we not only welcome in our new majors, but we also have a time of blessing, sending off our majors that are graduating, and they receive something from faculty, and it's a baton. And on that baton is the year they graduated and 2 Timothy 2:2. And we use that as a symbol of saying we've invested our lives into you, and now we pass this baton on to you because we have the confidence in you that God will give you the strength to continue the race, to strengthen that. And we're going to be here to cheer you on. This is really what we do. I want to think about first, though, how we have been impacted. Think about the very first person. Now, I do need to prepare you. I'm going to make you talk a little bit tonight. So I hope you're okay with this. I do realize we're in a room of talkers, so that's very dangerous, but I'm going to take my chances. When you think about the first person that we need in our lives, the first one is this: we need a Paul. We need that wise mentor who comes alongside us and pours into our lives. Think about what Jethro was to Moses. Someone to come alongside and give him that wise counsel to say, Moses, you can't keep this up. Somebody that can be objective, can look into our ministry, can look at how we're ordering our lives and say, let's call a timeout. Let's rethink this. Let's stop. We need that counsel. Think about David in his counsel that he gave to Solomon. As he comes to the end of his life, he gives Solomon very direct and sometimes violent solutions. Not recommending those for church. He gives him some very direct, specific ways. Son, this is how you're going to establish your throne. David was the warrior. David was the successful king. His son was young. He needed that. It's no wonder then that Solomon later writes in Proverbs 27:10, don't forsake the friend of your father. So David passed that on to his son. Solomon's son, probably should have memorized that in Awanas. Yeah, Rehoboam, not so much. The reality is, all of us, different stages in our life, we need somebody who can come alongside us and give us some counsel. So growing up, loved to work on cars. My dad was a tool salesman, hand tool salesman, so I was around tools. They also sponsored a funny car driver, so grew up around fast cars, just loved all of that. So loved working on them. And my next door neighbor, Tom Slayton, he worked in industrial supply. I'm telling you, if you were a young guy that loved cars, this was the life. So I had a garage that was full of hand tools, and next door it was bench grinders, and it was all kinds of industrial tools, power tools. Yeah, it was good. It's about 20 years old, and I was restoring a 1947 Willys. So loved that old Jeep. I also hated the way it drove. Oh, it was just like a wagon, terrible. So I discovered that you could actually put a new front end, whole new steering and suspension system in that front end. It's like, this is going to be great. So one day I get out there one Saturday morning, and I just begin reefing on this 50-year-old front end suspension. You know how far I got? Nowhere. So I'm banging, I'm trying to use leverage. I get the rubber mallet. I move up to the big guns. Nothing is moving that thing. My neighbor Tom comes by every once in a while just to enjoy me, watching the sweat, the dirt, watching my sanctification come in waves. You know how that is. By the end of the day, it had gone nowhere. So he comes over, and there I am, frustrated, tools laying all over the place. Hey, kid. He hands me this big can, and it says on the front, industrial cutting fluid. He says, here's what I want you to do. He says, starting on Monday, when you first get up, before you clean up and get ready to go to school, climb under the Jeep, and under every one of those joints, just pour a little of this, put the cap back on, go to school. Don't touch it. Stop banging on that thing. Probably it's keeping him up anyway. No afternoon nap. So I thought, okay, got nothing else to do. Monday morning I do it. Tuesday morning I do it. Nothing's happening. Wednesday morning, Thursday morning. So I'm thinking, okay, I have another Saturday of banging away on this suspension. Then, get ready to go to school on Friday morning. I roll out. Guess what? Front end, laying in the garage floor. Yeah, that industrial cutting fluid, just give it a little time. Now, there's probably some other lessons to learn about ministry from that, right? Yeah, because, we have a tendency to take a hammer to everything. I learned that, so there's a way to do things I wasn't even aware of. I needed somebody from the outside. I needed somebody with more experience, who knew more options, who could come in and say, Greg, this is the way it should work. I needed to learn what Proverbs 19:20 says, listen to advice, listen to counsel, and become wise. The fact is, there's a lot of things we don't know. Our oldest was so inquisitive. He could ask questions incessantly. And at one point, when my wife and I were just about to the end of our knowledge and patience, he could tell we were getting frustrated, and he said, Dad, I'm only 5 years old. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. That's become a phrase in our family. You know how many times I said, look, I'm only 63. There's a lot of stuff I don't know. We need wise counsel. We not only need that wise counsel, young guys, you need perspective. So you need to hear the voice of somebody who's been down the road a ways, somebody who's been through the wars, come out the other side, somebody who's faced some of the same challenges you have and know what it's like, somebody that can sympathize with you and yet not leave you there. You need that experience. I woke up at 2 a.m. one morning with this lovely call. Every pastor, you know what it's like when the phone rings, I'm already starting to get dressed, somebody's in the hospital dying. Not tonight. The director of our men's ministry had been arrested in a prostitution sting. Yeah, that's pretty great. Thankfully, in those years, I was a pretty young pastor then, as I was trying to process this, a man by the name of Tom Younger, who had been president of Western Baptists and had pastored longer than I'd been alive, spent his last decade of ministry pastoring with me. Tom was invaluable. I remember two critical things. I learned through that process. As we began to deal with the confrontation process, the reconciliation and restoration process, honestly, some of my elders didn't have the stomach for it, because the prostitution arrest was only the beginning. So you know how it is, that just open. There was a group of our elders that their first response was, let's let him confess, we'll move on. We're just going to throw a giant Band-Aid over this and hope somehow under there it heals, which it never does. As we wrestled through this, and I struggled, I learned some critical lessons from Tom and all of his years of experience. He'd planted 18 churches when he was in Indiana. He'd pastored in Walnut Hills. He'd done so many different things. He comes alongside and he says, Greg, here's the first thing you need to know as you work with your elder board. Number one, no issue is bigger than this church. Because he could see the fractures. He said fractures can happen. He said whatever you do, you have to unite your leaders and unite this church and remind them that no matter how grievous this is, no matter how humiliating and how painful it is not bigger than this church. There was other times in the middle of those conversations and the struggles, he reminded me, he said, Greg, you need to just stand up before the church and say, the elders have gone through this. Here's as few of the details as I can give you. Here's the decision that we're making. Here's the discipline that we're taking. And he said, you just stand up and declare this to the people. And then he said this. He said, they either trust you or they don't. Comes down to that. You've been here long enough to earn people's trust. You can't go through all the gory details to try to explain yourself. You just have to be courageous and stand up and say it. I needed a voice of perspective. I needed that. I mentioned in the last message, I created what I thought was one of the most creative introductions to Colossians 3, 1 through 4. I was feeling so good about it. You know, this is the passage where it talks about seeing things through the lens, through the perspective of Christ being at the right hand of God, that he's ruling in authority and in power. So in order to draw people in, I created this introduction in which I described there's people that move among us that see things differently than we do. And I kind of described it like the beginning of a spy novel. They see things that we don't. They sometimes lurk in the shadows of culture. Oh, it was really on the edge. I felt awesome. Well, two things happened. Tom called me on the way home and said, wow, what was that? I also got a call from one of our older ladies in the church who was pretty sure that in my very creative introduction, I was secretly exposing some sin in her life, which I did not know about. And she was volcanically mad. So the next morning, Tom and I did a little pastoral visit. Whew. She was verbal. The best part about it was about 5 minutes in to the blast furnace, I realized, wait a second, she just misunderstood. I could kind of survive this. So here we are. I'm just taking it for a while. So as she finishes, and I apologize. I said, it had nothing to do with you. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, here's what I was trying to do. And then she basically was like, Pastor Tom, oh. So it wasn't about me. You just loused this up, pretty much. She went on, things healed well. She went on to become a great supporter in our church. This was the perspective I've needed. Boy, I was punctured. Whew. I mean, she had spiritually felony right there. She really had ripped into me. So we're walking out, and I'm licking my wounds. I get in, and I close the door on the driver's side, and Tom, as soon as the door closes, he just bursts out into laughter. Oh, he can't help himself. He's enjoying this. And after he finally gets a hold of himself, he says, Greg, Only been doing this for 53 years. I never seen anybody take a beating like that. It was good to laugh. Whew. Yeah, I needed that. We need somebody that comes along and says, look, you're going to recover from this. You know, there we are making it, our ministry is over. And we need somebody to come along, oh, come on. Put this in perspective. Let's step back. Take a laugh. Relax. We need that. We also need cheerleaders. So I know, first session we talked about the glories of the ministry. Those are not diminished, but it is true. There are times it's difficult. There are times we get discouraged. There are times that we lose some perspective biblically. I know that. We need somebody who comes along, cheers for us. The fact is, we don't always have that many around us in our church. We need that mentor that can cheer for us. We need that one who can live up to Proverbs 25:11. The word aptly spoken. It's like apples of gold, pictures of silver. The person who can come along and say, oh, you can do this. You've got this. I'm here for you. We need those. I would like to say that this is for young guys, but honestly, that's not just for young guys. Isn't that true? It doesn't matter how old we are. To have somebody we respect come alongside and say, great job. You got this. It feels good. I had an old teacher, he's retired now, Elliot Johnson at Dallas Seminary. Great godly man who for some reason took a liking to me. He came to one of my sessions just a few years ago at Evangelical Theological Society, and I was brave/foolish enough to address some of the minor prophets, especially Micah 6:8, in a CRT world, critical race theory. I thought, theologians especially needed to stick their neck out on current issues, and I thought we needed to have a biblical voice on this, and we needed to bring some perspective to it, so I just waded in. So I was in a session in which there was four 45-minute sessions. There were three of us that spoke. I was number 3. Talked about CR2. I can't remember what the other ones talked about because you'll see what happens. Fourth time was questions for everybody. I took all 45 minutes of them. Yeah, boy, people had questions all over the place from both sides. And so I defended as clearly and as compassionately and passionately as I could about what the Bible says about race. I talked about critical race theory as a failed theory for a very real problem that most evangelicals try to ignore. So I made people uncomfortable on both sides of the aisle. And when I got done, it's like, whew. Dr. Johnson comes alongside. I am 57 years old. And he puts his arm around me and says, hey, kid. Hey, kid, you did all right. It feels good. So for those of you who are at the top end of the mentoring, being careful about age here, your voice means a lot. Someone who has lots of years of experience, someone who has done it, your voice in the lives of some of these other young pastors carries a lot of weight. I'll mention it a little bit more in detail tomorrow, but we're doing some different things at the church with intergenerational ministry. And one of the things we're trying to do is challenge our older people to not check out. So I'm reading a book right now called If You Pass the Baton, Take It Back. Don't step aside. You're not done yet. Because so many of our older folks that don't think they have a voice, don't think they have anything to say. That's not true. So as retired pastors or as pastors who are much later in ministry, your voice so absolutely critical. We need a mentor. I'm going to talk about some ways to find a mentor, but before we do that, going to make you talk at your table. Here's what I'd like you to do. Just take a few minutes. Did you hear that? A few. I know pastorally that means 25, but I mean it like a real few minutes. And I want you to share around your table what's the most important thing or one of the most important things you learned from a mentor. One lesson. Just to take us back to remember how people have poured into our lives. All right, I'll give you about 60 seconds to finish up the amazing lesson. All right. So all of our lives have been shaped by the wisdom and by the investment of a wise mentor, somebody that's older, somebody that's more experienced than us. If you're looking for a mentor, if you say, I really wish I could say, I have that person in my life right now, but I don't. I can give you 3 quick tips. First one is this. So if you're looking for a mentor, look for somebody who's in the place that you want to be. Somebody who has successfully navigated the path. If you want to be a church planner, find a church planner. If you want to be a senior pastor. If you want to be a worship pastor, find somebody that's in the place, and then just go and start the question, start the conversation. How'd you get here? I want to be where you are. Tell me how you got here. I have questions about that. So first of all, find somebody in the place you want to be. Second, find somebody that has time for you. I have worked with thousands of students, hundreds of supervisors. And I can tell you, we turn a lot of supervisors away because you know why? They don't have time for our students. They see, it's a very funny translation philosophy. They see intern and they think free labor. It's not what we're going for. So we've pulled our students out of a lot of churches because the student comes back and says, yeah, they never talked to me. Throw me into the wolves of the middle schoolers or turn me over to Awanas, and then they hope at the end of the semester I survive, and if I do, I pass my internship. No, that's not really how it's made. Find somebody that has time for you. Not only that, but closely related to that, the last tip I'd give you in this area, find somebody who's open. Not everybody who is extremely successful, doing well, is really open to talk about it. You just have to find that person that not only has the time, but is willing to say, yeah, here's why I did this, and here's the choice that I made. Yeah, I second guessed that. That was a mistake. This is what we do. Find somebody who's open to you. So everybody needs a wise mentor in their life. Secondly, we need a Barnabas. Now we're not talking about that wise mentor. We're talking about that trusted friend, somebody that's right there in the thick with us. Churchleader.com surveyed pastors that quit, not just their church, quit the ministry. 43%. 43% of them said it's because they were isolated. So this is where the words we heard tonight about the importance of this fellowship and the importance of fellowship are so critical. This is why it's a burden that we have so many being in churches and so few that are actively involved in the fellowship. There's a lot on the periphery. It's when we're alone that we're most vulnerable. So my father-in-law pastors in sheep country, eastern Oregon. And if you've ever watched how packs of coyotes work, they will follow sheep, follow cows, they'll watch, and as soon as one is isolated, as soon as the one is away from the herd, that's the one. We're not that much different. We ought to run in herds. Protect and help and strengthen one another. The fact is, we need somebody who's willing to join us in battle. Listen to these words from Acts chapter 9. Listen to what Barnabas was willing to do. So this is just as Paul has come to Christ. And when Paul came to Jerusalem, he tried to join the disciples, but they were all afraid of him. They didn't believe he was really a disciple. Just stop and imagine. So just picture a serial killer who has targeted Christians, and now he comes forward during your invitation. How is your church going to respond to that? Well, we'll take his confession of faith right after we pat him down. We're going to be nervous. This is exactly what happened. This guy's coming on the inside. He's going to kill us. Verse 27, but Barnabas took Paul, brought him to the apostles. He told them how Paul, on his journey, had seen the Lord, and that the Lord had spoken to him, and how in Damascus he had preached fearlessly in the name of Jesus. So Paul stayed with them and was able to move freely in Jerusalem, speaking boldly in the name of the Lord. Paul was there because Barnabas stuck his neck out for him. Paul would not have had the beginning of his opportunity if it hadn't been for Barnabas. We need somebody who's willing to wade right in there with us, speak up for us, stand up for us. Somebody who doesn't just be there when things are good, they're always there. I learned this when I was a very young man. I grew up with two guys from when we were 2 years old. One of them, Mark, just a year younger than me. We were on a double date. It was going horribly wrong. And just to make it better, we come out from the restaurant. In a driving rainstorm, I have a flat tire. So there we are. Mark and I are out there changing a flat. We are soaking wet. We're dirty. And we're not all that happy. We'd really like to just get the car and our dates home. And there we are, soaking wet. And I'll never forget, Mark says, you know what the best part about this horrible date is? That you and me are together. It was the only redeeming quality of the night. That's the kind of friend we need, right? Yeah, when things are really ugly with the elders meeting or when things are really tough, that's the kind of need that comes in and says, hey, I'm here with you. Look, I'll change the tire with you. I'll get dirty with you. I'll go to battle with you. I'll speak up for you. Also, when we think about a Barnabas, we need a listening ear and a closed mouth. We need somebody that we can talk openly with and not fear gossip. I love this passage in Proverbs. The purposes of a man's heart are deep waters, but one of understanding draws them out. We need people that we can talk to openly. I'm jumping ahead a little bit with tips, but one of the things that we'll learn is very rarely are you able to do that in the church. It's too many names and faces. You need somebody. You need somebody that you can dump the load and know that it's safe. My Barnabas, one of my Barnabases in my life, talked to just last night. He was one of my more memorable students. He's the only kid I've ever seen write an academic paper, and it sounded like Bill Schonley. He wrote, no matter what he was writing, like he was a sports announcer. I couldn't count off because I was so amused, I couldn't quite get over it. He would write things like this. You know, if he's talking about the atonement of Christ, and then Christ died on the cross, bam! Yes! Delivered the goods, baby! Semester after semester of bingo, bango, Jesus does it again. Here's a surprise. He's a coach. Didn't see that coming. The way he blessed me, though, maybe it was because I was nice and just so amused at all of the... Never seen the Trinity score so many touchdowns in my life. Maybe because I was amused by that. As a few years after, as he got established in his coaching and his career, he reached out to me and he said, look, he says, I just appreciated the way that you taught me and the time that you spent with me. I want to support you. So we have regular conversations. We have dinner with our wives together. And he and I talk, and he knew that I was coming here. He says, look, I want to know how I can pray for you. Tell me what time you're speaking. I'm there for you. So we have these great conversations in which I talk to him about ministry, and he talks to me about zone defenses, and it's great. We need that. We need that person. You need that person. Also, this person, Barnabas, needs the kind of person that you can just relax with. Sometimes we get so focused, so work-oriented. We think everything has to be what's going on at the church. Everything has to be about leadership and planning. And sometimes we need somebody to just say, let's take a break. I can see that you can't let go. So you need to relax your fingers. You need to let go. We need to go do something else. I have a great friend, and we have amazing meetings. Do you know what our boardroom is? I have about a 16-foot canoe with woven seats and nice wooden handles and rails. Yeah. And so I'll tell people, we have staff meeting today. And we caught our limit of trout at Clear Lake. It's good. And we talk a little bit about ministry, but honestly, it's mostly to be away. I think there might be a statement of faith in there somewhere when we realize I don't have to be holding on to the wheel all the time. I don't know, maybe the sovereign God can take it for a while. Yeah, well, we go hang out. Tips. I already mentioned you may have to look outside the church. You may have to look for somebody in another field. I actually think it's helpful to have a really close friends that are not in ministry at all. Somebody that says, whoa, never happened in our firm. Here's what we do. And all of a sudden you think, never even thought of that. You know why? Because he's in a law firm or an accounting firm and you're a pastor. Somebody in another field. So if you're somebody who doesn't have that and looking, here's my best tip for you. You have to take a chance. This is how it works. Yep, you might get burned. You have to take a chance. Isn't that what the scripture says? In order to have friends, we show ourselves friendly. You may take a chance and you may discover they can't keep confidences. You may discover that they're not that faithful of a friend. That's okay. Swing again. Because I'm telling you, once you connect, once you find people like that in your life, it's worth it. And you need those. You need those with the wear and tear of ministry that we bear. We need people that we can completely open up with and can give us straight, clear, honest, compassionate support. Dave Miller was a good friend. Pastored with him early on. I taught theology with him, and I learned some incredible lessons from him. And I'll never forget the day. My wife and I had bought a piano from him, and as we were moving it into the house, his two sons, Scott and Mike, we were bringing it in the front door, and we banged it on the door, and on the backside of the piano, we knocked a little chunk off, not much bigger than the end of my thumb. No big deal. It's the back of the piano, slide it up against the wall, nobody sees it. We're all good. So that was on Saturday. On Monday, we're walking to class, and Dave has a roll of money in his hand. He's like, here, this is for that chunk my kids knocked off of your piano. He keeps trying to put it in my pocket. So if you know campus, we're walking towards P101, we're walking on the sidewalk, and we're on our way to class, and Dave and I are having this wrestling match down the sidewalk. I'm trying to keep it out. He's trying to put it in. I said, it's just a little tiny chunk. No, my kids. He said, I saw that as one of my sons. Those are too careless. So we're just back and forth. And we get to the door, and he closes the door so the students can't hear it, and he turns around, he says, listen to me. It's not about the stupid piano. It's about you and me. He stuck the money in my pocket and says, now let's get to work. See, we need somebody like that. Somebody who recognizes it's about you and me. We're in this together. So here's the question I won't make you talk about at the table. I'll save that one because this one might be a little close to home. Who do you talk to? Beyond your spouse, who do you talk to with ministry's toughest issues? Do you have somebody? Last, if we've been blessed by mentors, we've been blessed by trusted friends, God forbid that we would not pass it on. We need Timothy's. The passage we started with, that's exactly what it said. The things we've heard among faithful people, we pass those on to others who will be faithful to teach others also. This is one of the reasons why it's important today. Lifeway In their studies of pastors said in the year 2000, the average age of pastors was 50. Only 20 years later, the average age was 57. 7 years older in 20 years. The pastorate is not getting younger, it's getting grayer. Pretty sure B&N's about the same, isn't it? One of the burdens we have is, where's the next generation of pastors going to come? There's not enough. We'll talk about some ways to address that tomorrow, but there's not enough. Well, one of the places that it starts is right at home. Right where we are. I started wrestling with this when I turned 60 years old. I don't know why, but my 60th birthday was pivotal in a painful kind of a way. It sank in that I'd been at Corbin at a church for 30 years and probably was not going to be there much more than 10 years past. Just being realistic. So I began to think, I'm in the fourth quarter. It's time to start thinking about what happens next. Really began to shift my thinking. I look down my hallway and I have a lot of old people that teach with me. Right, Garrett? Yeah. You can say it. You can see that smile. Yeah. And I just looked down the hallway and I told them once, I said, you realize in 10 years, almost every one of these offices, somebody else is going to be in them. We can't treat our lives like it's a dead-end street. So I just began to wrestle with what's going to happen next. I don't want my ministry to be defined by, I crashed the plane. I'd like someone else to fly it. So when I began to think about my work at Corbin, there was a young man that had been a student of mine. I've known him since he was 18 years old and had taught with me part-time. At the time, he was a missionary overseas. Just really began to have him on my heart. And then I hear through back channels that he and his wife were considering moving back to the States. So I just began to pray, believing that this is the direction. This is the right way to go. So I went to our HR department and said, I know the rules. You have to, do the nationwide search, you do the posting, you do all of the, reviewing all the resumes, blah, 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 all the way down. I know that. I said, I'm asking for, a favor. I said, I know somebody. I said, I want to hire somebody that's going to be my replacement. And I said, I don't think if we did a whole search, we'd find anybody that's a better fit or that I trust more than this person. I said, all I'm asking is that you let me run him through the system. If he fails, we'll start over. Of course he didn't fail. This fall, he takes over my administrative roles. He's been there about 3 years. We had a lot of conversations. As we come out of meetings, he'd say, Greg, tell me why you said that. How did this work? Just the other day, we were talking about a speaker that we were coming. He comes down the hall and says, Greg, how do you do this? I was kind of teasing him. I said, do you want to know the right way or what I actually do? So I kind of give him some multiple choices. But he's been good to immediately come in. He just wants to learn. And next year, it's him. It feels so good to you know what? That's Jordan's question now. I feel good about it because I have confidence. Took about 3 years to bring him along. I feel good. I'll retire, and I was going to say golf. I don't golf. I'll fish. I'll be sitting out fishing, and somebody will talk about school of ministry, and I'll say, yeah, Jordan's doing a great job. Isn't that what we want for our ministries, for our churches? We don't want to have this egocentric idea that when I go, the whole place falls down because it was all about me. No, it's not what we're for. It's not what we're about. We have to work at handing it off. You've probably heard this before, but I was surprised at how common it is. Since 1995, the U.S. relay teams between the Olympics and the World Championships have lost because of 11 11 dropped batons and violations. Our teams have always been, in aggregate, the fastest team on the track. And 11 times we lost. You've seen some of those. That's agonizing, isn't it? They had all of the skill in the world, and they could not pass the baton. And they failed. You can be the most gifted pastor in the world. Your sermons can be stunning, even in other people's minds. Your church can be reaching the community in an amazing ways, but if it ends with you, it ends. And the baton hits the track, and the race is over. It's not a win. Very first church where I worked for a Greek immigrant. It was the most unique ministry experience I've ever had. He'd immigrated from Greece to America. Somebody had led him to the Lord, and he picks up a Bible, and the Bible says, hey, Jesus said makes disciples, so that's what he did. He worked at a car manufacturing auto plant, and on his break, he'd line up people in the back of his old Chevy Impala, and he'd start teaching them the gospel. Started winning people to Christ. This Greek immigrant never went to Bible college, never been to church, just like Jesus said we make disciples. By the time I worked for him, we had one of the largest children's ministries in America, and we baptized, between children and adults and youth, about 40 people every Sunday. It was phenomenal. On the south side of Houston, a very transient area, lots of people moving in and out. I'd never seen anything like that. I mean, his passion for evangelism. So most of the time, we didn't have staff meetings. We were out meeting people. Ever hear of Gillies, world's largest honky-tonk? I went in there with Brother Nick. We were witnessing to the bartender because they'd visited church. Like growing up in a fundamentalist church in the burbs, I'd never seen anything like that. So my eyes are about this big, like, oh, wow. My mom's going to come in here and see this. And here's Brother Nick. You need Jesus. I don't care about the whiskey, the alcohol, any of that. Let's get past that. But you know what happened? He could not. He was such a unique person, and for whatever reason, he could not find a way to pass that ministry on. And a church that had thousands of people in it collapsed because he died of a heart attack one night, and there was no one to take his place. So what had been an incredible triumph for decades became a tragedy overnight. Drop the baton. This is not designed to add guilt you into adding more things to your schedule. I want you to think about when you pour your life into somebody else, you're not just stacking more things in your schedule. In reality, you're changing the way that you do your schedule. So when you're on your way to the hospital visit, going by yourself? Just stop by and grab that guy in your church that, seems to have compassion and seems to be able to reach out to people. Hey, Jim, why don't you come down? We're going to go see so-and-so in the hospital. See how they do. So your deacons and elders meetings, ever have somebody come in? Hey, come in and see how this works. Just introduce them. Just begin to bring them in to your life. So there's a basic management process that's for leadership development, and I know that you know this. It's always some kind of version of this. It starts with I do, we talk, we do, we talk, and then you do, and we talk. It's a great simple way to think about how we pass our ministry on. I do this with young teachers at Corbin. I have quite a few guys that want to come in, maybe think about a teaching ministry. I always start this way. It's like, hey, Why don't you come in and start hanging out in class with me? So here we am. So he comes in, they visit, they watch, and then after class they'll say, now here's what happened in class. Here's why I did this. Here's why I'm thinking this direction. And here's why I did this particular question series. And they're like, oh, okay. And then next time around, I'll come in and say, hey, I have an idea. Why don't you help me do something? So we're going to do a class activity, and you and I are going to do it together. So maybe we're going around and working it with student tables, and I have him doing a part of it, and I'm doing a part of it. I'm kind of coaching it, but I'm still controlling the action. It's like, this is how it's going to work. And then the next step is that, hey, how about you teach part of it? So we sit down and we develop it together, and then he teaches a portion of the class. And then the next step is, how about this time, you pick a book or you pick a section, a topic, and you develop it. And if you want me to look at it first, great. Otherwise, hey, you come in, you do 20 minutes in the middle of class. And then after we talk about it, you just slowly begin to bring them along. I'm telling you, it's a powerful way to help bring people in. For one thing, someone who thinks the Lord may be drawing them into ministry, but they lack confidence, this is your opportunity to bring them along carefully, to bring them along slowly, and to come alongside and say, hey, you know what? Have you ever tried this, or do you think about this? And then the next time they try it, they're a little bit more successful. And they just begin to build and grow in ministry and in their skills. This is about passing our life along. Yeah, it takes a little bit more time, but now you're multiplying. You're multiplying your effort. You're passing it along. When we think about the person we might pass it on to, I give you one last challenge. It's not always a young guy. You think about your church, there are people in your church, there are guys in your church that are mid-career. The Lord could be readying them to make a pivot. There's a lot of people in our churches who they come to a point where like, I've made the money, that's all right. I'd really like to do something else. There's actually a full-time ministry called Halftime Ministries. It's for people just like this. Maybe that's the person. So who do you look for? Well, I'll give just a couple of tips. The first one is you need to find somebody that you can connect with. So the reality is we can't work with everyone. Right? Our personalities are different. The way that we like to teach or the way that we like to interact with people, it's all different. I've learned I'm happier to have an intern that is highly motivated, and I'll even take reckless over one that I have to build a fire under. Counseling, nudging, not really my thing. I use this analogy. It's way easier to steer when we're moving. I still have an interest in getting that car moving. I know other guys that they just love the person that they can sit and talk to for a long time and reflect, and and they can really help build them from the ground up. That's great. That's not me. Find somebody that works for you. Be willing to spend the time. All right, one last table question. Are you ready? This one is going to put you on the spot. As you go around the table, one simple question. Who replaces you? Whatever role you have in your church, when it's empty, who's in it? So I don't want to end great conversation, so I'm going to have a semi-closing prayer and encourage you to linger over really a critical question about what comes next. Father, we thank you for the privilege we have to serve you. Thank you that we bear your name in the gospel in a world that desperately, desperately needs you. Thank you that you allow us to do that. Father, now we realize that none of us last forever. Therefore, someday, somebody's going to be in my pulpit, studying in my office, ministering to my people. Lord, I pray that you'd bless these conversations as they continue. Father, I pray for every pastor here who in their mind there was a blank. I pray that you would lead them to someone that they could begin investing their lives in, someone that they could have confidence, could carry on the work. Faithful men who will be faithful to teach others also. Disciples making disciples, leaders making leaders, pastors making pastors. For your glory, amen.
Thanks, Greg. It's so good. Really helpful for us to be thinking and praying together on these things. Hey, I know you're ready to go be a little closer to your bed. So we're going to send you out and get some really good sleep, hopefully, tonight. Just an encouragement, tomorrow schedule, I know we kind of packed it this evening tight. Tomorrow in the morning, there are 2 sessions, but then the afternoon's open. And so the intention with the afternoon was that there are a couple opportunities that maybe could be used during that time. If you need to just go get a nap, you're welcome to do that. But we were hoping that regions or teams could use some of that time for some extended discussion or time together. So our region, if you're in this area, we're going to grab lunch, and then we're going to go actually look at a church that involves trying to purchase. They're going to give us a tour. It's a school building, and we're going to talk about the challenges of, making space work. So if you're in our area, if you want to come along on that, you are welcome to do so. But also there's a Ben, where's Jacobs? Ben's got, there's a couple frisbee golf courses close to us. And if you want to do a round of frisbee golf after lunch, we will line that up, so talk to Ben. And then if you would like to just have some of the people in your area or people you're working with for ministry things to meet and talk, Greg will be around. He would be happy to sit down and just brainstorm with you in the afternoon. We just need to set that up a little bit time-wise, so you'd have to talk to us. So those are 3 options. There are other things you can do on your own, obviously. If you want to line up Top Golf or a hike or something like that, be really good weather tomorrow. So that make sense? Okay. Very good. God bless. We'll see you tomorrow.